Can science prove that God exists or disprove that God exists? What is the evidence? This is something that we want to investigate tonight, so please stay with us. Welcome to EWTN Live. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and this is our opportunity to bring you guests from all over the world. Our guest tonight is a good friend of the network and one of my Jesuit brothers. He has been using the culture's own favorite weapons of science and philosophy, but he uses it to counteract the atheists and agnostics who accuse people of faith of being ignorant or naive. So please welcome the president of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith, Father Robert Spitzer.
Thanks.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good to have you. You know, in my introduction, I mentioned how you're working to deal with the atheists and the agnostics who consider us ignorant, right? Mm-hmm. And what I always like to do when I meet someone who's a self-proclaimed agnostic is remind them that by using the Greek word agnostic, they sound sort of classy. Yeah. But if you use the Latin equivalent, then you're just simply identifying them as ignorant.
Exactly.
And that's what they are.
Exactly.
They don't know if there's a God or not. Yeah. So how are you using science to approach that? As a matter of fact, let's step back from that before we get to it. Why do atheists and agnostics think that they can trump people of faith by talking about science?
Well, I think there's been a kind of a prejudice looming for many, many years, you know, that maybe beginning with the time of Galileo or something that seems to put a tension between faith and science, but in point of fact, it's not there. And I think, you know, I've often said to students, you know, who ask me, you know, well, gosh, how could XYZ scientist be an atheist or, you know, an agnostic? And I just say, well, scientific atheism is not scientific. There's a lot of reasons to be an atheist, but one of them is not science. In fact, we're now in a period, this is the best time in the whole wide world to be alive if you want to have evidence for God from physics. And we have a quote that, you know, sort of in the front of all of our curricula. It's from Dr. Alexander Vilenkin. And he sort of states what's going on. Dr. Vilenkin, by the way, is the director of the Institute of Cosmology at Tufts University, theoretical physicist, very well known, and went to Stephen Hawking's birthday party. More about that later. Yeah. But basically, this is his conclusion based on the evidence that we now have from physics. Part of them is from space-time geometry proofs. Part of the evidence is from entropy and anthropic coincidences. But he says it this way. He says, it is said that a good argument will convince a reasonable man, and that a proof will convince even an unreasonable one. Well, now that the proof is in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They must confront the reality of a beginning. And of course, a beginning in physics really does imply a creation on many different levels. And so we're looking at a point in time where the evidence for God from physics is getting very, very substantial. And physicists are talking about it.
Right. Let's take a look here. Something that you mentioned that about an eternal universe. One theory that was held by some of the Greeks, for instance, is that the universe had always existed, correct?
That's correct. In fact, Aristotle and Plato held that view.
That the physical universe always existed. And then you have a number of scientists who also hold theories, not based on Aristotle necessarily. No, they're using different kinds of theories. But they also think that the universe may have been an eternal universe. It comes and goes, but same matter that keeps coming and going, right? Now, when you say that there is a beginning, as a matter of fact, one of our Jesuit brothers, Father Lemaitre, came up with the Big Bang Theory, as it's usually called. And this theory means that the universe has a beginning. It didn't go on forever. And that's key to some of this evidence that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Bang, Father Lemaitre's theory, by the way, has been very nicely verified. But a lot of physicists, in the contemporary age, thought that they could maybe get around it by postulating what's called an inflationary model universe and quantum cosmology like string theory or loop quantum gravity, which might allow the universe to go back before the Big Bang.
So in other words, their string theory means that the universe would exist before the Big Bang. There was a time.
Only creates the possibility of that. There's been no verification of any pre-Big Bang period. In fact, but it is possible. But the interesting point, that the very one that Dr. Alexander Vilenkin was talking about, is the new proofs, what we call space-time geometry proofs, actually show that all these pre-Big Bang scenarios, they would have to have a beginning too. So in other words, let's suppose you believe in string theory and it actually got verified, and inflationary theory is totally verified, and all of a sudden maybe some of these speculative models that are based on these things were really true. So for example, a multiverse. A multiverse is like a mega universe, and it's kind of popping out all these little bubble universes all the time. And our universe is just one of those bubble universes, according to the hypothesis, right?
Right. And you see that. I mean, it's a silly example, but you see that idea in something like the Men in Black theory. They present that as a little possibility. That there are a lot of universes out beyond our universe. We're just one. And there are others.
Right, and what Vilenkin is saying is, well, because what's called a multiverse would have to be inflationary.
What does that mean?
That means it's accelerating, it's expanding very rapidly. It too would have to have a beginning, because the proof that he's referring to in that quote I talked about, it's called the Borda-Vilenkin and Guth proof, or the Borda-Vilenkin and Guth theorem. And essentially what it shows is that any universe which has an average rate of expansion greater than 0 will have to have a beginning. And this is, by the way, is a very, very solid proof from the vantage point of physics. Well, a multiverse has an average Hubble expansion greater than 0, rate of expansion greater than 0. And as a matter of fact, oscillating universes, even oscillating universes in higher dimensional space of string theory, they have to have a beginning, because they will have an average Hubble expansion greater than 0. And of course, if you go down the line, every single scenario that people have been able to come up with for a pre-Big Bang model, like a multiverse or an oscillating universe, which is a bouncing universe, expanding and contracting, or even a bouncing universe in higher dimensions, every single one of them has to have a beginning. And of course, what Vilenkin is saying is, with the proof now in place, there's no escape. We have to all confront the reality of a beginning, every physicist. And that's a very relevant thing.
See, and again, let's just make sure that we understand this, that in physics, there are a variety of theories, as we said, like multiverse, that there are these, say, just to get an imaginative picture, each universe is its own bubble.
That's correct.
And there are a whole bunch of these bubbles, and that these bubble universes are outside of each other. And inside the bubble are billions and billions of stars and solar systems and galaxies.
Yeah, that's the theory.
Right, that's the theory. That's the theory. But one of the very important, it's a basic principle of physics, I believe it's the second law of thermodynamics, that things expand because and there's going to be entropy. So, excuse me, that there's entropy. So that if the universe is expanding, that means it had to expand from some other point. Just like when you put a rock in a pool of water, the rings go out.
Yeah, well, the board
there's that kind of expansion.
Yeah, but that wouldn't really be the Board of Elenkin and Guth proof. That's kind of what's called space-time geometry proof.
Right. Yeah. But I'm saying that given this, that these principles would apply not only to what's inside our universe, but even
everything.
these other universes.
That's right.
So they've got to deal with some sort of beginning.
That's correct. That's correct. And the evidence is there. And you bring out a whole other set of evidence too. Because in addition to these space-time geometry proofs, and by the way, space-time in our universe and the general theory of relativity, you can actually make all kinds of predictive models on the basis of that. In fact, this fellow, Dr. Alan Guth at MIT, he had also a series of models, and he basically tried to model out virtually every single possible model that science has come up with or could come up with on the basis of, inflationary expansion. And this is what he came up with in 1999. He said, after examining all of these models, try as scientists might to come up with a model that could be, past eternal, they have been unable to do so. Every one of these models can be eternal into the future, but it cannot be eternal into the past. So they must have all had a beginning. That's the quote.
In other words, what he's showing is that the universe is kind of like us. We have a beginning at the moment of our conception. And from that point on, we will live forever. But we didn't live before that point.
That's correct.
And so the universe may go on for who knows how long.
Right.
But you have to say that it goes back to a beginning.
That's right. And a beginning in physics is very significant. And it really doesn't matter whether it's the beginning of our universe or a beginning of some hypothetical multiverse which may have preceded our universe.
Yeah, no matter what model or idea you have, if there's a beginning, there's a beginning.
That's right. And that implies a creation and a creator. Because the interesting thing about what might be called a very fundamental beginning or an absolute beginning in physics is it's also the beginning of physical time.
Right.
Prior to that, there was no universe, no physical time, literally nothing.
Right.
The universe was nothing. Now there's one thing we know about nothing. It's nothing. And the only thing that nothing can do is nothing. Right. Stephen Hawking notwithstanding.
Wait. Why are you picking on Stephen Hawking?
Because at one point he actually says in his book, The Grand Design, he says that, nothing is like gravitational force, or the universe can spontaneously create itself out of nothing. And then, of course, he has to redefine nothing as something like the law of gravity, which, of course, provokes the question, well, wait a minute, the law of gravity, if it's not in a universe, what's the law of gravity which is not in a universe? Well, the only option left is like a Platonic idea or an idea in the mind of God, both of which beg the question of the intellect that has the idea without the universe. So of course, it's silly. It's silly.
To understand the silliness, what he's trying to do
Yeah.
is say that we don't need God. That's one of his theories,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
right,
That we don't need God
Exactly.
to explain. So he says
Yeah.
that there was a force like gravity.
Yeah. But it's just a law.
But
It's not even a force in the universe.
See, that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Is that gravity
Yeah.
makes no sense unless something is the center of that gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, gravity is not a gas.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's not.
Exactly.
It's relative to something.
There's some universe to exist in and be.
And Hawking, as brilliant as he is,
Yeah.
is trying too hard to get rid of God
Yeah.
by making gravity seem like something. Would that be basically
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, obviously a child can tell Aristotle if he made an adding mistake. And this is such a fundamental metaphysical mistake. One must scratch one's head and just simply say, gee whiz, how could a physicist as brilliant, and he is truly brilliant,
Absolutely.
as brilliant as Stephen Hawking, literally say that nothing is something?
Right.
I mean, and of course, I mean, getting to the end of the, you know, the whole, proof that I was just talking about. Well, gee, if the universe was nothing prior to the beginning, then it could never have moved itself from nothing to something when it was nothing, because the only thing it could do is nothing. And that means a creator, basically.
Again, one of the using the model. It's a very vague model of this, but you know, what could I do to force my own conception? Nothing, because before I was conceived, I did not exist.
That's correct.
And I could not force my own conception. I can't make me be conceived. Somebody else, my mother and father, had to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in physics, it's really absolute in a way. I mean, when you're talking about nothing, and physical time is nothing, the physical universe is nothing, all the constants of the universe are nothing, well, then the universe can't move itself to something. Therefore, something else had to do it. And that something else has to be outside of our universe, has to transcend the universe, and that's why we call it a creator, or some kind of transcendent creative force, or God.
See, another point that we have to make about it is that if, as you say, there was a period of nothing, that time began with the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing can't do anything.
that's correct.
That's just a basic principle.
Yeah.
So something even greater than the universe
Yeah,
had to make the something out of nothing.
that's correct.
There's no other way.
There's
to
no other
explain
way
it.
around it. It's anything else is really illogical.
Right.
You know.
And another point. This is you've done some great videos here that explain this, and you don't do it so much as getting a lot of these scientists to get involved in the discussion.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the facts of the universe that modern physicists point out is that there are certain principles operative in the universe that are called constants.
That's right.
And they're brilliant. It's amazing. Can you give us what some of those constants are?
Sure. A constant is just a number, but it's a number that controls all of the equations of physics and therefore all of the laws of nature. And the interesting thing about these constants is you can't really vary them at all from the values that they currently have in our universe and have always had. They're constant.
Give us an example of one.
Okay, the speed of light constant, 300,000 kilometers per second.
Okay.
Okay, and now that number controls a myriad of equations in physics, including, remember Dr. Einstein's E equals mc squared. C in there is the speed of light, and that's the constant which controls the conversion of energy.
But what if the speed of light was just a little bit faster or a little bit slower? Would that make any difference?
It would make a difference, and in fact, in all the constants, I mean, we have 4 universal forces, for example.
Okay.
and the electromagnetic force, and it has three constants: the mass of the proton, the mass of the electron, the electromagnetic charge. We have also the weak force, which controls radiation and particle decay. We also have the strong nuclear force, which is binding protons together in the nucleus of an atom, right? You might wonder, hey, wait a minute, why is it that these two protons, which should repel each other, how come they're bound together in the nucleus of an atom? Because they got so close, the stronger force, called the strong nuclear force, took over. That's your third force. And your fourth force, of course, is gravity, that force of attraction between particles. Now, just for an example, let's suppose that the gravitational force, or the weak force, were off by only 1 part in 10 to the 50. So that's a decimal point, 49 zeros, and a 1. That's a very small fraction.
Smaller than I've ever seen.
That's right. It's 1 part in 10 to the 50, higher or lower from those two constants values. Either our universe would have continuously exploded in its expansion, which would be very bad for life forms.
Couldn't exist.
Couldn't exist. Or the universe would have collapsed into a black hole, right? Where all the mass of the universe is collapsed into 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, which is really bad for life forms. The point is, one little, just megascopic fraction higher or lower in those two constants, we can't even have a single life form in our universe.
Or you couldn't have any, could you have molecules?
You couldn't have,
Could you have atoms?
Well, you could have, perhaps a strange kind of atom. Let's put it that way.
But the atoms that we have, you couldn't have.
No, I mean, your periodic table would be,
Totally
vastly
different.
altered.
Right.
And
then,
example,
of course, you couldn't have the suns, the stars.
Yeah, I mean, they would be your continuous explosions.
And you
or
couldn't
your
have
black holes.
planets.
Yeah.
So nothing would, just that little difference. And one of the points that we need to understand, and why it's good to know these constants and think about them, is that if they were, again, a fraction, 0.4901,
Yeah.
if they're a little bit different,
Higher or lower.
Higher or lower. It could be. So someone had to know precisely each one of these without that variation
Yeah.
for all the variables.
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, every one of those constants, we've got about 20 of them in our universe.
Right.
And you can't explain that on the roll of the dice, if you know what I mean. To say that this happened by pure chance would be astonishingly, improbable. I mean, astonishingly improbable. I mean, I'll give you a couple of others. Just if our strong nuclear force constant were off 2% higher, then there would be no hydrogen in our universe. Very bad for life developing. No hydrogen fuel, no water. Alternatively, if it were just 2% lower, we'd have no element heavier than hydrogen, which would be equally bad for life forms. I mean, again, if you had, just take your mass of your proton, your mass of your electron, and the electromagnetic charge and gravity, just those 4 constants. If you just varied their values from their current values ever so slightly higher or lower, you would have all blue giants or all red dwarfs stars. These are different kinds of stars in our universe.
And you would never have a sun like ours.
Yeah, you'd have, exactly.
You could not have a sun with the kind of planets going around it in which life could be.
Yeah.
Now,
a blue giant would fry everything, and a red dwarf would freeze everything.
Right.
And you'd have no life forms.
Right. Now, the importance of this is that not only do we need to have a creator who makes this big bang, so that which couldn't come out of nothing, it had to come from a creator greater than the whole universe. But also, the creator is so intelligent that he's not blowing off a firecracker that can go in any direction by random.
Exactly.
It is also guided by an infinite intelligence that makes all these constants, 20 constants,
from the
work.
very Big Bang itself.
in the Big Bang work throughout the whole universe.
Exactly.
And keep everything possible and make it possible for not only life, but a rational life form to develop on one of the planets, which is just in exactly the right position in the Milky Way to be able to observe all this.
Well, and as a matter of fact, when you really look at it, it's just truly, truly remarkable. Some physicists have tried to explain it with a multiverse or something of that nature. But to be honest with you, multiverse explanations have their problems. First of all, you can never really directly observe a multiverse.
Yeah, it's only a concept in your mind of what could be.
Yeah.
But you can't know it.
Yeah, and also, all multiverses have to have a beginning, according to the Board of Vilenkin and Guth proof.
Right.
And then, additionally, all multiverses that we know of currently have to have fine tuning. That is to say, in their initial parameters, conditions, and constants, the multiverse also have to have fine tuning. Why is that? Because as it's coughing out little bubbles, it can't let the bubble universes bump into each other. That's very bad for life forms if the entire space-time continuum is wiggling like a jello. You can't get any consistent things happening. So you got to make all those bubble universes roll out very symmetrically in a slow roll. But that requires tons of fine-tuning. And all we've done is we've moved the causal explanation for all this fine-tuning in our universe just back one step. Okay, now it's our universe. Now you...
So, but the point of being able to deal with that is that when agnostics or atheists try to get around the Creator by saying, no, there's just a multiverse, there are all these other universes, they still don't explain that. And they don't explain that origin.
No, they don't explain the fine-tuning, and they don't explain the beginning of the multiverse. So basically, we're back at the same thing. And of course, as Paul Davies once put it, when you postulate trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of bubble universes just to explain ours, that's like bringing excess baggage to cosmic extremes. Yeah. And of course, at the end of the day, you can our kids deserve to know this. And that's why we put everything together at the Magis Center of Reason and Faith.
Right. That's one of the keys. We've got to take a break, but I just want to mention that the material that Father Spitzer is working on and is broken down for high school kids and for adults who are not physicists.
That's right.
But so that you get the basic explanations, is so that our students can have an answer from science to those people who are trying to attack their faith when they go to the university.
Exactly.
Our kids get picked off by so many of the professors who think they know more physics, and maybe we do have a more reasonable answer than they do with their atheism.
Well, most of the professors doing the picking don't know any physics, so that's the...
I just want to mention that the place you can get this is called www.magisreasonfaith.org. Magis is MAGIS, then reasonfaith.org. And that's the Magis Center of Reason and Faith. And you can find out more of these materials and get the stuff that, I'm always struggling with him to get him to bring the hay down so the goats can get it. But he's done that in these books and tapes, and this is good stuff to get. We're going to have a break. We'll come back in just a couple of minutes and get some of your questions and comments as well. Thank you and welcome back. We have a really nice group of folks here. Most of them have come over from New Mexico and different towns over there, and plus a few other folks scattered around. And we would love to have you. If you can come here on a bus like these folks did, or if you want to come with your family, just as an individual, you are more than welcome. We'd love having you here. So contact our pilgrimage department. You can call them at 205-271-2966. Or you can also go to the website, www.ewtn.com. And they will help you with where you can go stay, different times for the masses that we have here every day, and confessions, tours of the studio, the programs where you can be part of the audience, all that. And it's just great to have you. And they'll also let you know where you can go get those fried green tomatoes that we're so famous for right here in Arndale, Alabama. So come on down to see us. Are you ready for some questions?
I sure am.
All right. Let's now go to a call. We have Michael on the line. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Father. I just want to ask about the Higgs boson particle. Is it legitimate science to combine data from one independent study with another independent scientific study to determine the existence of the God particle? And after all, that's what those scientists are looking to prove. Since God is infinite, he's so large that, his makeup would be infinitely small, and that would be the God particle.
Well, I would, first of all, the word God particle is a complete misnomer. The Higgs boson, which actually is an indication of the Higgs field.
What does that mean?
The Higgs field is like a field that, has emerged. It's already emerged at the Big Bang, right? And what it does is when the energy from the Big Bang is moving out along with the Higgs field actually slows that energy down. And by slowing the energy down, effectively gives it rest mass. It sort of densifies it in a way. And the reason it got called the God particle is a complete joke. I mean, obviously it has nothing to do with God or creation or anything like that. It has to do with converting energy into rest mass. And the reason it got that name was because someone who was writing about it wanted to call his book, the GD book,
right.
The GD particle. And of course, the editor said, "You can't call your book that." So he took that and instead said, "Well, let's call it the God particle. Maybe that'll sell books." And so they kind of did this great marketing gimmick, and the marketing gimmick kind of stuck. And so you had the God particle, which has nothing to do with God or creation or anything, but actually the conversion of rest mass. It, by the way, is a very legitimate science. It validates the last puzzle piece, as it were, in what's called elementary theoretical particle physics. And that last piece explains rest mass. And so now we pretty much have a comprehensive particle theory thanks to the discovery. But having to do with God, just a marketing gimmick.
Yeah, so it had nothing to do with God. It's just a particle that, as
indicates
basically,
a field.
It indicates a field in which energy went across it and began to, I guess, cool down and slow down. So sort of like those little ridges before you get to the toll booth, sort of getting you to slow down. Well, I heard one guy say that it would be appropriate for you. You have a lot of trouble seeing, and that those are for people like yourself. It's Braille to let you know how much to pay. All right, we have a question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from the Black Hills of South Dakota, Rapid City. And Father Squared, I completely agree that faith and science are very complementary.
And your own field is?
My own field is I have a PhD in nanoanalytical chemistry. Okay. And so from my personal experience, as I've learned more about science, it's only enhanced my faith. But one observation I'd like to soundboard and see what your experiences are, is that with my colleagues, what I've seen is with 93% of scientists either being atheists or agnostic. Somewhere along the line, they move from saying, wow, look what God did, to, wow, look what I did. And that's been my best shot at trying to explain why science isn't doing the same for my colleagues and enhancing their faith. Do you have any comments on your own personal experiences?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, obviously, Stephen Hawking went through a very similar thing. In the brief history of time, he actually implies a creation at the end of the book. What breathed fire into the equations of physics so that it could actually do something. And then, of course, in the grand design, he kind of recants it. And you say, well, how come he did that? Was it on the basis of science? And the answer is no. It really isn't on the basis of science, and so there must be something else going on. I agree sometimes, when scientists are agnostics or atheists, sometimes it's just legitimate scientific desire to wait until the last possible moment. So you're just going to keep being a naturalist until you can, it's so far beyond the shadow of a doubt, it's like a deductive proof. And you're really never going to get a deductive proof in science, so they're going to remain agnostics forever, because science has to always remain open to further discovery. But then you have a lot of other motives. I mean, you really do have motives where people are suffering, they can't explain their suffering, and of course, that causes them to reject God or to be angry at God sometimes.
That if God was so powerful and so good, why would he let me suffer?
Right. And then
that's a common question.
Yeah, and then as our questioner just has suggested, there are many times when narcissism really kind of can take over. And all of a sudden, when you start thinking of yourself, sort of like, I made a great discovery, and you think of yourself as almost messianic and akin to God, you kind of bump God out of the center because you're trying to get in there. And God's, of course, getting bumped out to the periphery. And sometimes you even have people who like to be God for others. They want, but I would say, most physicists who are atheistic, I find are just extreme naturalists. They, even if something, like a beginning is totally provable at this juncture, if you believe the BVG theorem is, and it's right now there's been no real response to it, then why would you not be open to the possibility of a creator, a transcendent creator? That non-openness seems a little extreme at this point when you really do have some very good substantial evidence. So I think he's onto something. Sometimes ego can definitely get in the way of the decision toward theism.
And also, this is an area where so many people in the church are not, in the level of physics that other scientists are. I know so little of physics. And there would be, a lot of other people who are theologians that don't have an ease with physics by actually doing physics and bringing their faith in it. We've had Anthony Rizzi on who does that. He's a researcher himself and a writer and doing great work in physics and bringing his faith in. But there's not enough of that coming from people in the church to meet the physicists. And this is another thing that we have to also deal with ourselves.
I mean, that was the whole reason we started the Maggia Center of Reason and Faith. To be very honest with you, we were trying to take the latest physical evidence, but very few people are out there reading, physical review letters and, journals of theoretical physics. I mean, they're just simply not. So what you have to do is you have to take those theories, from Alexander Vilenkin or Alan Guth or whoever it may be, because they publish in the peer-reviewed journals of physics. Then you have to simplify the argument so that people can understand what they mean by it and of course see the validating aspects, of God or a creator or intelligent God in that evidence. And then you have to put it into a form where, for example, high school students would be interested in it. So we started, for example, the Reason series, What Science Says About God. It's just 5 DVDs, right? You could do this in a religion class in a Catholic high school, a confirmation class, and homeschoolers could definitely do it. So you just take the 5 DVD set and you watch it, and it's done in a very interesting way where a kid goes to college. His name is Joe. He gets a roommate, Tyler, who's an atheist. You know, Tyler's constantly blogging him and beating up on him for being the church boy and being naive and so forth. He finds 2 colleagues, Dan, a physicist, a graduate student, and Elena, who's a philosophy graduate student, you know, and they start giving him the evidence we've been talking about, but in a way that's accessible to high school students. And all of a sudden, we build up, you know, and answer the questions of, can science disprove God? Of course it can't. I mean, obviously, right, God's outside of the universe. And of course, scientific evidence has to be based on observation, which has to come from within the universe.
Yeah, the only way that you could say science disproves the existence of God is if you say there is nothing but matter.
Yeah.
And you already begged the question.
Yeah, but of course, if God, by definition, is outside the universe, you know, you're absolutely right. You either beg the question, but you certainly can't prove it. Right. So, I mean, so it's things like that. So we answer that question. We look at the evidence for God from physics. So we look at those space-time geometry proofs and why they show a beginning. We look at entropy, why it shows a beginning. We even look at all those anthropic coincidences, right? Those constants that we were just talking about. We even look at evolution and the Bible. We look even at, you know, the evidence for you know, survival of human consciousness after death from near-death experiences that have been done by very legitimate medical peer-reviewed studies, which are longitudinal over 15 years, and just look at, well, is there any evidence for a soul? Absolutely. There's exceedingly good evidence for souls that published in The Lancet, which is Britain's most, you know, well-known
medical. It's a medical journal.
It's a medical journal, and the JAMA Diseases of Children
and
journal.
That's the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Exactly. And all these journals have just a ton of evidence. Our kids deserve to know all of this stuff. And by the time, you know, we beta tested this curriculum with the high school kids. And with looking at the 5 DVDs, you know, and we have a faculty resource manual and a student workbook, by the time these kids are done, I get thanked. I just was doing a lecture at a particular high school in Southern California a few weeks ago, and there were some kids there going to MIT and to Harvey Mudd for graduate school, for undergraduate school, and they actually stayed behind after the graduation to thank me for that talk on their graduation day, because it was the most significant thing that had happened to them in their high school. I mean, so in other words, they need to know. And a significant percentage of our kids are going to become functional agnostics and atheists if we don't help them to see the scientific evidence for God, if we don't help them to see that faith and science are not incompatible. We're going to ruin scientific career. I mean, if you think that faith and science are incompatible, then if you're going into a scientific career, you're going to think you can't have faith. Or if you're going into, if you want to be a believer, you think, well, I can't go for a scientific career. I mean, it's all just myth that has been created by many parts of the media, by many university professors. But as you can see from the evidence is clearly on the side of God and on the side of a creation, on the side of an intelligent God. One of the things we do with our high school curriculum, I'll just say this real quickly, is we have an online forum for the students and for the teachers and the parents. Anybody who buys any workbook gets a passcode to get on the online forum. You can ask any question you want. So a teacher or a parent doesn't have to be an expert in physics. They can get the answers, the kids can get the answers they need right from the forum. We have PhDs in physics and philosophy and high school teachers, very well trained, who can actually give the answers to those questions. But you can order it from that website that you mentioned.
Right. Yeah, ModusReasonFaith.org. Let's go to another call. I have Matt on the line. Hello, Matt.
Yes, hello.
Hi, where are you from?
San Francisco, Bay Area.
Great. And what's your question?
Well, a couple of quick things. One is the secular world is very pro-science and anti-Catholic. and is extremely ignorant about what Catholics believe about science. Even scientists that I know in Europe, as well as the U.S., are not aware of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Mm-hmm. So is there anything that Catholicism and the Vatican can do to make known its scientific beliefs and its studies? Because an awful lot of people simply don't know.
Well, there's a good attempt on the part of that's a great question, on the part of a lot of people to make this known. I mean, for example, Dr. Stephen Barr, has a wonderful article that's available free of charge on the internet called Catholic Priests in Science. So the person you mentioned, Father Georges Lemaitre, who discovered the Big Bang Theory, or Gregor Mendel, who was,
discovered genetics.
Genetics, was an Augustinian monk, and there's a whole variety. I mean, frankly, even Copernicus, who discovered the heliocentric, first version of the heliocentric theory from a mathematical point of view, was also,
he was a cleric.
A cleric. And of course, you look at all these things and you go, well, gosh, there's a lot of Catholic priests involved in science. And of course, Catholics themselves, there's just tons of them. And at the end of the day, you have to look at it and you go, well, do Catholics have something against evolution? No, we actually don't. For all intents and purposes, what Pope Pius XII told us way back in 1951 was in Humani Generis, was that so long as we don't reduce the human being to a mere biological or physical organism, and we believe in a soul, a unique soul for every human being, basically you can believe whatever science can properly validate about evolution. So, but we have been criticized for virtually everything under the sun. Your caller is correct, and what I'd say, caller, is the best we can do is try to put that stuff out there. On our, again, if I might shamelessly advertise that website, magusreasonfaith.org, we have a free encyclopedia. And you just go to the encyclopedia tab and just click it, and you get two encyclopedias. One's called the God Encyclopedia, the other's called the Christ Encyclopedia. If you want all the evidence for God from physics and philosophy that you can possibly look at, what's the view of a beginning? Why doesn't God need a creator too? Why does human suffering take place? Or are you interested in the historicity of Jesus from all the latest historical arguments? Just go right on that website. Just click on those encyclopedias. And of course, get your kids to do it. And maybe we can start getting some of the prejudices about the Catholic Church eradicated. Stephen Barr article too, and there's a lot of other great articles that are out there. In fact, EWTN has run some very good shows too by Dr. Woods on Galileo and science in the church. Those are excellent, well done scholarly jobs by Dr. Woods. So there's all kinds of things, but it's just a start. I agree with you. We really need to do more. And we have free video casts and podcasts on our website as well, but we need more, and anything you can do to help would just be great. Take all of our stuff and link it to your stuff. We would love it.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that Catholic high schools and universities have always had science departments.
Absolutely.
And that we want to encourage Catholics to be in science, mm-hmm. and have that dialogue between faith and reason at the mm-hmm. forefront of what we do.
And that's the whole rationale for Catholic school to begin with.
Exactly.
Faith and reason, and the blending of it, the beauty of it. I mean, the fact that, physics is pointing to God all over the place, and our kids don't know it. It's a shame. But we want to get this to the homeschoolers. We want to get it to the confirmation classes, because with the confirmation class, right, that's the last chance gulch. And of course, if they don't get it at the confirmation class level, off they go to college, and of course somebody comes along and goes, "Why, you naive little whippersnapper, don't you know that science has disproved God?" And of course, if they don't know any better, they go, "Really? I didn't know that." And of course, that's the end of that in one fell swoop. All those years of great homeschooling education or public education or Catholic education out the window. And of course, the point at the end of the day is, we need to circumvent it. We need to go back to good apologetics, scientific apologetics from good peer-reviewed journals, and that's what we're trying to do. And others, like I said, please link up our stuff to your stuff. We want to get the word out there to everyone that we can, because we need to reach those kids.
Yep. I have another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from northern Arkansas.
Great, welcome. And what's your question?
I was wondering, for people that have closed minds, could you give some techniques to get them to do more research or to go to your website or things like that?
You know, I think there's two things that are going on. Sometimes people have closed minds because they've heard errant theories from somebody and they've never been properly countered. Now, if that's the case, let's call that an intellectual problem. I think a person who got hoodwinked by somebody came along and said, did you know that science has disproved God? And they kind of believed it. You can say, actually, that's not true. If you're willing to read, you know, Dr. Alexander Vilenkin's article or something of that nature, or just give them something even on a popular level. So, you know, Lisa Grossman, for example, covered Alexander Vilenkin's visit to Stephen Hawking's 70th birthday party, which was a big shindig where all these physicists were reading these scientific papers, right?
So for his birthday party, instead of balloons, they brought scientific papers.
That's right.
All right.
And so anyway, so Vilenkin comes over to the birthday party and he presents his paper called Why Physicists Can't Avoid a Creation, right? And of course, you know, he presents all the stuff from the Board of Vilenkin and Guth theorem, tops it off with all the entropy evidence, and basically says, well, the best that science can do right now is to say that, the universe or any multiverse in which it could possibly be embedded must have a beginning. So, of course, Lisa Grossman calls she titles her article, from the New Scientist, and I'll put the link on EWTN if you want. It's called Why Physicists Can't Avoid a Creation, the worst birthday present ever. So, you know, you get the point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
So, but that's an intellectual problem. But let's get back to the question. What if it's a problem of the heart? In other words, what if the atheism has nothing to do with being intellectually duped, or, you know, having a wrong impression about science, or just not knowing the philosophical evidence or something like that? Maybe it is something else. And there's generally about 4 or 5 big problems of the heart. You know, one problem of the heart is suffering, which is unexplained. And we as Christians, we got to help people to see God's presence in suffering, how the Holy Spirit can be opening doors when other doors close in their lives. That's part of our call, because you just can't let people kind of blame God when God is actually trying to help. But there are other kinds of problems too. I mean, some people honestly resent religion because maybe they had a parent and the parent was just constantly hammering on them all the time, and they were very religious, and they just finally said, well, you know, if that's what religion does to you, I give up, you know. So again, we as Christians...
So we have to pay close attention to why somebody has chosen not to believe.
That's exactly it.
And part of our task is not just having the answers, but also engaging that person.
Absolutely.
And knowing them and what their real issues are, so that, as we used to say in my neighborhood, you got to scratch them where they itch.
Exactly.
You know, make sure that you really get, you got to get to the real issue, and not the issue you want to answer.
Right. Right.
But the issue that they need to answer.
Yeah, a few probative questions right at the very beginning, you know, where you just say, oh, you know, what's really bothering you? You know, is it, you know, has something happened to you? Or,
and it just takes time to get to know them.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things that we have got to get to know is that the show is coming to an end. So I want to thank you for being here, because on the time-space continuum, we're just about out of it. Why don't you join me in giving a blessing to our audience? May Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. And you know, Father Spitzer is here also doing a series about pro-life and giving some great evidences for that. And other people come here doing great series. And we want to bring you the best we can, but we need your support. This network is brought to you by you. You make it possible. So please, especially in these summertime months, keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill so we can keep on paying all of our bills. Thank you.